Good afternoon and welcome to Beautiful Conversations. I am Garbo Hearne, Director of Hearne Fine Art, and we're located in Little Rock, Arkansas, in the heart of the Dunbar historic neighborhood, the oldest Black neighborhood in Arkansas. We have been around since 1988, and we have provided a platform for local, regional, and national and international artists of color. Today, we're focusing on art through the lens of the word beautiful, which we all know is in the eye of the beholder and within. The 6 artists in Beautiful take us on an artful journey through various media and subject matter. 2 weeks ago, we had a beautiful conversation with Latoya Hobbs, who's currently active in Baltimore, Maryland, but from North Little Rock, Arkansas. So we are proud to have all of the artists in this exhibition that we've worked with for many years. And today on the call, which you'll meet there are 2 artists that are also in the exhibition, and we're glad that you're here. Today, we are honored to have with us Phoebe Beasley, who has been a part of the Hearne Fine Art family since 1993, when she was the featured artist for the first Arkansas Black Hall of Fame presentation. From there, Phoebe has been part of the Hearne Fine Art family, and she's been in Arkansas at least 5 times, showcasing and sharing and growing with us and showing her artwork. So Phoebe and I have always had a very special relationship, and she has always supported Hearne Fine Art, and I'm so happy to have you here today. Sunrise is Coming After a While is the featured work for this presentation today, which is a marriage of fine art and literature. Sunrise is Coming After a While is a compilation of poems by Maya Angelou, written by Langston Hughes, and illustrated and created by Phoebe Beasley. So in 2020, we were in the midst of the pandemic. Phoebe and I were talking about her coming to Arkansas, being a part of Beautiful, and we all thought that we would still be together, which was the plan. And obviously we are not, because we're back in the same shape, maybe worse, but we are here today via Zoom, and we're glad that you decided to spend part of your afternoon with us. So back to Beautiful. So Phoebe and I talked about how to bring this project back to life again. And knowing that Phoebe is, her signature media is collage, I suggested that she perhaps take each one and reimagine them and go deeper into the thought of each of the poems, which is what she's done in a magical way. So today we're going to go through each of the poems, but we do have a special presentation by a father and daughter team, Leron and Jamee McAdoo. And they have published, performed, and presented poetry all around the nation. They are proud residents from Little Rock who believe in the power of the arts. So after the presentation of the 6 poems, there will be a conversation with Phoebe regarding her career and her work. And again, you'll be able to ask her questions. So sit back, you're in for a treat. Introducing Leron McAdoo, for today's purposes, Langston Hughes.
You're muted.
You're muted.
And ladies and gentlemen, I cannot duplicate that great intro I just gave, but I know I can. My name is Leron McAdoo. Myself and my daughter, Jamee McAdoo, will be reciting poems by Langston Hughes to accompany this great artwork by Phoebe Beasley. And we'll start with Daybreak in Alabama. Daybreak in Alabama. When I get to be a colored composer, I'm gonna write me some music about daybreak in Alabama. And I'm gonna put the prettiest songs in it, rising out of the ground like a swamp mist and falling out of heaven like soft dew. I'm gonna put some tall, tall trees in it, and the scent of pine needles, and the smell of red clay after rain, and long red necks, and poppy colored faces, and big brown arms, and the field daisies' eyes of black and white, black people. And I'm gonna put the white hands and black hands and brown and yellow hands and red clay earth hands in it, touching everybody with kind fingers, touching each other natural as dew, and the dawn of music when I get to be a colored composer and write about daybreak in Alabama.
Thank you, Leron. And thank you to Garbo and all the people who said yes to being here. I am so appreciative. I wanted to start with how all of this came about with Sunrises coming after a while. In December of 1997, I received a phone call. It was on a little tape. Remember those tapes that we had that recorded conversations? And mine was from Dr. Maya Angelou, a friend, a mentor, and someone who collected several of my works. And she left me a message that said, "Sister, hear me well. There is a project that I know that nobody else can do but you. And it's important to me and to everyone, once you finish this project, that they see how incredible your work is. So I hope you'll say yes. And that's my Christmas present. Merry Christmas and goodbye." And I'll tell you, I kept that tape. I had it for months that I would replay it, because sometimes mentors see things in us that we cannot see in ourselves. And I kept thinking that Maya thinks I can illustrate the poems of Langston Hughes. Well, okay, let me think about this. And in 1998, the following year, it was Maya's 70th birthday, and Oprah Winfrey was going to be doing a cruise for Maya for 10 days of Maya's closest friends, and I was on that cruise. And the important part of this is that Langston Hughes was a merchant marine, so instead of doing everything that was supposed to be happening on the cruise, sometimes I would just go up to the top deck and try and conjure up Langston so he could tell me what he was thinking when he did some of his poems. And what you're seeing, you'll see the original, the silkscreen first. That should be on the screen. Thank you. And this was done by, Langston actually wrote this in 1940. And this was probably the most difficult one for me to do because it's called Daybreak in Alabama. And my grandparents were from Montgomery, Alabama. And in, goodness, when my father was about 3 months old, my grandparents picked up, left Alabama, and moved to Cleveland, where, by the way, Langston also went to school in his young years. And the only thing they would say about Alabama, my grandparents would say, "Whew, glad we're not there. Whew, glad we're living in Cleveland." And so they didn't want to hurt us and give us any pain of what they had been through. And so when I saw the poem Daybreak in Alabama, I thought, oh my goodness, I'm going to try and be hopeful and encouraging and think about a new day, a daybreak. And so it actually has a figure in overalls who's kind of writing. And I thought perhaps that could be Langston writing his Daybreak in Alabama. and what that must look like to Langston from that poem. And fast forward to 2021, when I was commissioned to think about doing a reimagining of that. And by then, you know, nobody had been in my family back to Alabama, but a few years ago, I got an invitation from the University of Alabama in Tuscaloosa to come back to Alabama, where nobody in my family had been since they left, and do a workshop and bring my artwork and meet with the students and spend days on campus. And I thought, do I dare? Everything I've heard about Alabama. And I thought, maybe it's time. And I did go to Alabama, the University of Alabama. It was the most welcoming place I could have selected. And I did see a lot of the changes that were happening around the country through the eyes of Alabama. And so I wanted to be more celebratory, the art that I did on this one. So you'll see somebody holding a umbrella and dancing and having a better time than perhaps Langston had when he wrote this poem. The next slide. For the next, and now we'll have Leron come back and talk about this poem. Thank you.
All right. Aint Sue's stories. Aint Sue has a head full of stories. Aint Sue has a whole heart full of stories. Summer nights on the front porch, Aint Sue cuddles a brown-faced child in her bosom and tells him stories. Black slaves walking in the hot sun, and black slaves walking in the dewy night, and black slaves singing sorrow songs on the banks of a mighty river, mingle themselves softly in the flow of old Aint Sue's voice, mingle themselves softly in the dark shadow that cross and recross Aint Sue's stories. And the dark-faced child listens, knows that Aint Sue's stories are real stories, and knows that Aint Sue never got her stories out of a book at all, but that they came right out of her life. The dark-faced child is quiet as a summer's night, listening to Aint Sue's stories.
One of the things that I was thinking of when I read this poem was so many of our families have a griot, an icon, an Aunt Sue, or an Uncle Buck. We have all of these folks in our families who tell the stories, who help keep the legacy alive. And sometimes you have a young person who's kind of listening, as in this illustration, and then you have the older child who maybe they're getting some of it, but they don't want to act like they're getting any of it because they know everything. So there's nothing really to get at this point. But once they're older, they understand how important those stories that they would hear in their families are. And then in 2021, I wanted to have more people involved in that story. More people in the family, all ages, that were really listening, because again, I had seen the change. I had seen African-American history and museums being built and how much we were collecting African-American art. So our legacy was becoming more important. And having more people understand how important. As you notice, there's even a train or a bus, some form of transportation, because we were carrying these stories around. So they could be in a bus station, train station, because again, keeping our legacy alive has been so important. The next poem.
Dream Variations. Yes. Dream Variations. To fling my arms wide in some place of the sun, to whirl and to dance till the white day is done, then rest a cool evening beneath the tall tree while night comes on gently dark like me. That is my dream, to fling my arms wide in the face of the sun, dance, whirl, whirl till the quick day is done. Rested pale evening, a tall slim tree, night coming tenderly black like me.
Thank you, Leron. This poem was written in 1926. And like so many of us artists, sometimes we rename things or we change the name or somehow it gets changed over years. So this was actually called Dream Variation, and you'll also see that it was Dream Variations with an S at some point. So it's okay to use both. I looked at the fact in my mind's eye that usually there was one person in the community or several people, an entrepreneur, someone in the church that we looked up to, that gathered us all together. That's the reason for the outstretched arms. And they dressed in such a dapper way that we would think is dapper today. We would think it's fairly ordinary for someone to be, a man to be in a tie and a suit, because that was the dress of the day. And particularly if you weren't working the fields. And so that was my idea of that 1926, perhaps that's what was going on Dream Variation. And then to recreate that outstretched arms, it appealed to me that we were doing more of that with reaching out, and with all of the griots we've had since then, whether it was Martin Luther King or Thurgood Marshall. We have dozens of people that we can thank that we're still here, we're still standing tall. And so those outstretched arms could be someone in your family, and that's what was important for me to have all age groups in that. Next poem.
All right. The Negro speaks of rivers. I've known rivers. I've known rivers ancient as the world and older than the flow of human blood in human veins. My soul has grown deep like the rivers. I've bathed in the Euphrates when dawn was young. I built my hut near the Congo and it lulled me to sleep. I looked upon the Nile and raised the pyramids above it. I heard the singing of the Mississippi when Abe Lincoln went down to New Orleans, and I've seen its muddy bosom turn all golden in the sunset. I've known rivers, ancient, dusty rivers. My soul has grown deep like the rivers.
Thank you. That was a gorgeous reading. I wanted some connection to Africa And with the pyramids, there's that obvious connection. The river could have been that Langston was speaking of, the Nile, if not the longest river in the world, it's certainly one of. And so that connection to me was most important. Langston wrote this poem in 1921 when he was 17 years old. And here we are still regaling what he was able to do at such a young age and so masterfully. Then looking at that in 2021, The Negro Speaks of Rivers, and what has transpired to me, again, is to bring more people into the fold, that the rivers are used not only for commerce, for food, for enjoyment, but to bring the next generations along. And at some point, I was commissioned to do an artwork on the Amistad. So I actually incorporated that ship in the artwork in 2021. And more people crossing the river. That the Amistad, by the way, it sailed into Mystic Seaport, Connecticut. I'm sure most of you know all of this history, but I was actually in Mystic Seaport when they were recreating that ship, and with some of the same kinds of wood that they had used on the original ship. So to see that, nothing brought more tears to my eyes was seeing that slave ship recreated. Thank you. Next poem.
The Weary Blues. Droning on a drowsy syncopated tune, rocking back and forth to a mellow croon. I heard a Negro play down on Lenox Avenue the other night by the Pale Dove Parlor and an old gas light. He did a lazy sway. He did a lazy sway to the tune of those weary blues. With his ebony hands on each ivory key, he made that poor piano moan with melody. Oh, blues, swaying to and fro on his rickety stool, he played that sad, raggy tune like a musical fool. Sweet blues, coming from a Black man's soul. Oh, blues, and a deep song voice with a melancholy tone. I heard the Negro sing, that piano moan. Ain't got nobody in all this world. Ain't got nobody but myself. I'm gonna quit my frowning and put my troubles on the shelf. Thump, thump, thump. With his foot on the floor, he played a few chords and he sang some more. I got the weary blues and can't be satisfied. Got the weary blues and can't be satisfied. I ain't happy no more, and I wish that I had died. And far into the night, he crooned that tune. The stars went out, and so did the moon. The singer stopped playing and went to bed. While the weary blues echoed through his head, he slept like a rock or a man that's dead.
Thank you. And Langston also wrote many of his poems and his books with music playing. I understand that because I write and I also paint to a lot of jazz. And so I've always thought I want to be able to paint like when McCoy Tyner plays. Grew up listening to jazz. So it's an important component of how I think. and having one person and understanding how weary it can get in the middle of the night, I wanted that, that stellar and secluded feeling that you're alone, but you know that you have to get this work done. You have to do your art. And so often, oh goodness, we're asking ourselves, should we continue? Is this the right path? And then once the weary blues are over, you rejoice that you're still able to do what you can do. And then rethinking that, reimagining that poem. Again, I wanted to surround our piano player with more people that had the weary blues and also were able to keep that music going. And at some point, because I had at one point 2 dogs, both of them about 90, 100 pounds, but there's a dog in this one. I thought my dog one of them used to just lay on my foot while I was painting. And it wasn't to comfort or for the heat. He would know when I got up and if I went to the kitchen, and also that if I opened the refrigerator door, he might get a treat. So he was always at the ready for getting a treat. But he was such a comfort to be there. And I thought, these folks need a dog. That's what my feeling was. They need a dog in this. Thank you. Next slide.
Mother to son. Mother to son. Well, son, I'll tell you, life for me ain't been no crystal stair. It's had tacks in it and splinters and boards torn up and places with no carpet on the floor, bare. But all the time, I's been a climbing on and reaching landings and turning corners and sometimes going in the dark where there ain't been no light. So boy, don't you turn back. Don't you sit down on the steps because you find it's kinder hard. Don't you fall now, for I's still going, honey. I's still climbing. And life, for me, ain't been no crystal stair.
Thank you, Jamie. This poem was done in 1922. And Langston was born in 1902, so he was 18 years old when he did this. And to be able to express it so vividly is just, it's a gift. And I wanted that woman who has the sign that says, don't buy where you can't work. You can't read it from where you are. Because so many women were out here on the forefront, raising the family, making sure that their husbands got to work and that the household ran. But they also knew how important it was to make changes for the future, for their children. And so when it was time to pick up a stick with a placard, make those placards, get out there and march and get your friends together, you'll see what happens on the Reimagined. That what happens is you were able to coalesce your whole community on the Reimagined one. And if we could see that one, you got the next door neighbor, you got your kids out there, you got anybody who had time and knew what time it was, either in the community, they knew time was of the essence to make change. Otherwise, we would be regretting it. And so having more people, and if I had one theme looking at all of the works I reimagine, it was looking at the whole breadth and scope of how the communities have come together over the years and what we've been able to accomplish. I don't know that we spend a whole lot of time saying, oh my goodness, look how far we've come. We spent most of our time just saying, look how far we've got to go. But I'm so appreciative of the people who got me here, that we're on somebody's shoulders. My family is on my shoulders. Thank you.
So this is the final poem of the Sunrises Coming After While suite. Would you like to move on to, the kind of a brief tour through your career with the works that we selected, or
That's just fine.
Okay, so I'll just move on to the first one, Fine China.
Fine China, and I think Alice is here. Alice is one of my collectors that also owns this. Fine China I did in 1993. I was actually in radio sales for about 28 years. So I had this dual career. And now sometimes you hear people saying, I just want to wait until I'm discovered, or I just want to do my art. No, you have to make sure you're making your life work, and the finances are a big part of that. I was in sales and actually did very well. Found out, I love doing it. It's arduous, but I was painting at night, and this was commissioned by my radio station, KFI Coast at the time, to do an original serigraph, 12 color, that 300 edition that we would be giving to our clients and advertising agency as a present for Christmas, for the holidays. And I didn't want to do it at first because I didn't want to mix my careers here. But my sales manager finally convinced me, wait a minute, if IBM can commission you to do something, why can't we? I thought, okay, all right. And that was in 1993. It's one of those things that is appreciated, and I am pleased that I did the project. Soapbox. Some of you out there may remember why television was called a soapbox. And that was in the early days of television. Those of us who remember when we didn't have television, when we first got black and white, and then you got color, and you would watch the test pattern that was on all night because you only had television during the day. And at night, television went off and the test pattern came up. And the reason that was called the soapbox, so many television, because the programs that were advertising soap, detergent, different kinds of soap products. And so that was the major sponsor in all of television in the early days. So that's why this is named Soapbox. Vacation State. And I want to thank John Harris and Stan Burns, who bought this artwork recently. Vacation State was someplace in my mind. In Cleveland, you got in a station wagon or you got in the family car and you went out to the airport and watched the airplanes take off. You didn't go far from home, but you went on country drives. And so it was some of the most memorable times, some of the most happy times. So that Vacation State to me was a mental place. It was the state of being on a vacation and what it felt like. And you could smell the red soda pop or the hot dogs on the cookout. So I wanted to recreate that in my mind to say how important that was, and actually got actual wood to recreate that station wagon so I could have some realism in it. Thank you. This is one of my most recent, Trouble on Track 39. Looking back to the times when, oh goodness, we began to think, oh, the riots were just last year and all the troubles we've had. No, it's been quite some time. And as Gordon Parks once said to me, if you think you've had trouble now, and he said that to me in the 90s, you should live when I did back in the turn of the 1900s. So we're always thinking that what we're seeing is the first time. And those of us who actually marched, or we had a song, We Shall Overcome, and you had people, the sleeping car porters, that A. Philip Randolph had founded that union, and they continued to do their job because people had to feed their families, pay their mortgage, pay their rent. And so you had this complexity going on in many areas, in many places, of people just wanting to get past all of this, and people knowing how important it was to march and take a stand on an activity. Thank you.
All righty. So thank you everyone again for joining us. My name is Anna. I'll turn my camera back on so you can see me. Hello. I will start off with some questions, and we do have some questions in the chat, which I will pose. Since the presentation did start off with the poems, I'll start off with the questions about sunrises coming after a while. And this question can definitely be posed to actually Leron and Jamie. But the question is from Mr. Lawrence Smith. He asked, when there is time for questions, we're here now. He asked, why is the first line in the edition of Daybreak in Alabama different in the edition than the one read today in other published versions? And LeBron, that might be a question you may want to address.
Well, I actually don't know the question. I mean, the answer to that. I know as a poet myself that I often do poems when I present, and original poems, and I may change a poem, and sometimes poems evolve as I speak them or I compete in slams. Sometimes my poem will evolve and a different iteration of that poem will come out at a different time. A lot of times the way I write poems are not always the way I end up reciting them after I've practiced and done some other things. So I don't know the answer to your specific question, but in my specific case, I know my poems evolved. It's not static. And I don't know about that.
Thank you. I think that's an excellent response. All right, so let's talk about the art, Miss Beasley. So you are formally trained, have a BFA in painting, I believe.
Yes.
So can you just talk about how you arrived at embracing collage as your primary medium? And then just as a kind of a twofold question, it's just like, just really, what is your process? Like, why do you select these certain squares and different things that we'll get into that a little later, but really just why collage of all these mediums that are available to you? Why collage, and why was painting your first, you got the BFA in painting? Why painting?
I think that, goodness, thinking back that many years, I graduated from Ohio U in 1965. But for me, it was my medium of expression. I felt very comfortable with it. And for the most part, it was in oil. And then experimentally in the university, I started using more collage and actually ripping canvases and working from the back and front, because I like the fact that you could walk out of the canvas kind of. And I like the fact that the canvas could almost talk to you. And so those elements, plus the texture and the materials in a collage. I didn't start collage seriously until I was a high school art teacher in Cleveland at Glenville High School, and we ran out of paint. Not unusual in those days, but I had to think of projects to keep my students engaged to the end of the year. And it was collage. Bring in materials from your house, bring in newspapers, let's cut up things, let's see if we've got different fabrics from your people who actually do some sewing in your home. So they were so creative, my students, that it made my heart sing. And so when I saw what they were able to do, I was just, more engaged in wanting to do more with collage, and feel very comfortable to the point that when I go in a paper store, in the days when we did have paper stores, just being able to touch the papers from Sri Lanka or from Indonesia, whatever it did, it set off all of my senses. So I had to have all of these things. I do remember talking to a professor. I was at the University of Rhode Island doing lectures, and I happened to like his scarf and mentioned, oh, that would look so great in a collage. And by the time I got back home, he had sent it to me. Well, having somebody's actual scarf, you're thinking, do I really want to cut it up? And I see potential in it. And so I mentioned that when I was at the University of Alabama, that I'd gotten this scarf, and the professor there for the luncheon for me actually brought in this big box and said, Phoebe, this is everything my mother sends me. You see what you can use. Maybe you can use some things in your artwork. Well, it's not unusual now for people to have a Phoebe box in front of their door that they throw things in, because everybody I know is de-sessioning. I'm the only house and studio that's accessioning, because they know I love stuff. And so I have many folks, I have their discards. Thank you very much. And I'm very appreciative. So hope I answered that.
No, that's great. So I also definitely welcome everyone else to ask questions. I'll ask, just as an African-American woman, do you feel a responsibility to tell a story with your art, or do you feel like you respond to your experiences with your art or through your art?
Oh my goodness, I am one of those artists who wants to give you as much information as I can. So I title my work. Some artists don't. I don't even know how they keep track of it when it's untitled number 62. So, Trouble on Track 39 gives you some information about what I had in mind. And yet people will see it and they will say to me, oh, I saw Gandhi in that. And I thought, if you saw Gandhi, that's just fine with me, because whatever you see, you're part of the art. You bring your own information, as maybe not as a working artist, but certainly your artistic vision to looking at the work. And so it's going to be different for me and you, what it is we see in the work. So it's real important that I give as much information, and I don't mind talking about the past because I'm one of those people who perhaps with that historical perspective, I think it's important that I use my art. Some people use their writing to carry on what we did in the past. And being able to tell a story, like I did one called Langston and Zora. And people would come to me and say, well, who exactly were they? And it's an opportunity for me to tell that story about two of these great writers that generations have not heard about. So.
And how you doing? And it's been a pleasure working on this project with you. And thank you for telling me to get my bow tie right. So, amen. Being a fellow educator and having students, when you see that student with potential, is it hard to convince them or their parents that art, though very hard, very challenging, can be a career? Is it hard for you to encourage your talented students to go in that direction?
It's probably easier with students. But they're not usually the ones who come to me. It's usually the parent who says, I want you to talk to or tell me what to tell them because I want them to go into this direction, or I want them to make sure that they're doing their art, that they're still playing a musical instrument that they learn. And I will tell them, no, have the student call me, because talking to you, obviously, that's not, they may not want to hear it from you. And so I'd rather hear that the student is serious about the work, because they're going to have to do it. And it is a long and difficult road. I remember when Bill Russell introduced me, he wanted to introduce me to Dr. Angelo. He was going to be doing her television show, and he said, I want you to come with me. And the reason was, if you're serious about doing this, then you need to know how difficult it's going to be for a Black woman to have a career in the arts. And meeting Maya may help you to understand that. I did not realize she would become one of the closest people to me.
Wow.
But it was an incredible 50 plus years I knew Maya. And when she lived in Los Angeles, she was able to say, sister, come over, we're having, John O'Killens is here, and Jimmy Baldwin is in town, so come for dinner, please. And I thought, no, I've got to finish my presentation to McDonald's, that I've got. And I thought, fine, I can do this. I can figure out how to do it and make my life work, because that's what she would say. You're educated and smart enough to figure it out. That's what I expect you to do. So that was part of the wonderfulness of having such wonderful mentors.
Question. So I know, like, with the collage, the materials are kind of like up to you. Like you can use whatever, at your own discretion. I loved your story about the scarf, and now people have like a Phoebe box for you. But I was wondering, because in my art classes in middle school and high school, we would always, bring magazines or newspapers. So how has the materials changed over the years? Maybe like the content inside the magazines, or just what you use for your collage. Have you noticed any major differences while making them?
Oh, I probably not as many differences for me as students, because again, they're so tied to celebrity. They're tied to images. They're very tied to where they think they ought to be and how much they ought to be making. And also some of the images they see on the computer. And I'm one of those people who says, you need to turn it off, listen to your heart, listen to your head, listen to your own dreams. And once you start listening to somebody else's, and there are thousands of things now on now, whether it's television or streaming or whatever else they call it, that you can get caught up in somebody else's ideas about what you should be doing or what you should be paying attention to, and you're not listening to what your heart is telling you. So if anything, I'm encouraging young people to spend a little more time from within.
Phoebe, can you talk about the process of reimagining sunrises coming after a while in terms of what exactly is a collaged monoprint?
Oh goodness, the collage monoprint is actually, well, materials, first of all. I was working actually on the I was actually working on the serigraph that you see behind you. And so working on that to incorporate what's in that, and also pasting materials onto that paper. I was concerned about how the paper would take it, whether it would be able to hold up, whether it would change what was happening before, and also what I was trying to do now. Just the history of the paper being able to hold up in all of this. So, and then, you know, when I first heard your idea, you know, you want to hang up on you. That was my first thought, is that Garbo's not feeling well. You know, she's got some idea. I got to figure out when to say no. And the more I thought about it, that because we're so tied to what we see our images today and what they look like, that is as though history didn't happen to some of us, that I like the idea of rethinking something I did almost 25 years ago and trying to figure out what Langston was thinking, about 100 years ago. He did it in some of those in 1922, 25, 26, some of those poems that he wrote. And so we're looking at about 100 years ago that he had these ideas and trying to pick up on all of that. Thank you.
We have some questions in the chat. Definitely like to ask those or allow the audience members to ask them, but so to Phoebe, Leron, and Jamie, Langston Hughes was an early poet who was writing when things were still really grim for African Americans, yet he is one of the most hopeful poets I can imagine. Do you think he was actually hopeful, or was he constrained by the times? And this question comes from Ruth Shepard.
Oh, well, I think, oh, wow.
Yeah.
I'll say it from my perspective. I don't want to speak for Mr. Hughes, but I'll say, and I believe my family and my circle to be hopeful people. I believe that we have a tradition of moving forward, a tradition of resiliency. And so I just would think that I got that from somewhere. My grandmother had a famous saying, she passed in 97, but she said, you're living off the prayers of others. So hopefully I'm living off Langston's prayers and all the Amaya's prayers and all those great people that came before me. So, and I hope that optimism and that hope for the future, I hope I got that from them.
And I would say both, because I think you can only live in the time that you live in. You can only see the past, you know, as a way to move forward. You can't really see into the future. but you can be hopeful, you can be optimistic, you can make strides to have a better tomorrow. So I think, yes, he was constrained by his times. Yes, that was all that he had known, but in the same token, he was hopeful for the future.
Well, and I would add that Phoebe's artwork is very helpful
Thank
as
you.
you look back on, and the progression of your artwork becomes more hopeful.
Thank you. Thank you.
And what's not to love about everything you've done and all of Langston Hughes? Thank you, guys.
Well, I think that as an artist, as a group, when you think of all the arts, we are the most hopeful hopeful mammal on the planet. It's that we know we have to get up and do something that hasn't been done before. And it's going to be through us that if we have the wherewithal to get up, we should be thankful that so many people made it possible for us to be here and to do the work. As difficult it is to think about, well, am I going to be able to sell this work? Am I going to be able to, all the questions that we have, everybody has, but I think with artists, because we're not really going to we're inventing our business and we're inventing the art. So we're busy. We are busy people.
So I have a question, or actually we have an audience member, Sonia Spencer. Would you like to unmute and ask your question?
Oh my goodness.
Oh, yes, I have a question. I acquired a black and white artist proof that's called Musical Chairs that was done in 1980.
Oh my goodness.
Was it ever, was there ever a painting with the musical chairs? I actually kind of tried to Google it to see if I could find if there was a picture. Can you tell me a little bit about the history? The artist proof came from someone that used to do framing for you in California. And I guess you gifted them, they did a lot of framing for you, and it was a gift to them, apparently in 1980, somewhere around there.
I remember doing it, and I actually did it. It was Art Center College of Design, and I would go there at night and use their multilith and scenery and trying to remember the professor's name that I worked with. But we could only pull these small series like 4 or 5, and so not sure what yours has, but oh goodness.
It just says artist proof, and it's black and white. It's black and white. It's not in color. And I was just trying to find.
I only did it in black and white.
Oh, okay.
So it's appreciating, and that whole idea of the musical chairs, that game we played in elementary school. You get to see more and more of that because they only seem to want one of somebody. And that one chair is the only one that's left for us. So that was part of my idea on that musical chair.
Oh, okay. How many prints were made? 4 or 5, you said, or?
I believe about that many, but I'd have to look it up. Whew.
Oh yeah, it's not. It just says artist proof. It's not numbered.
Oh.
So.
Alrighty. So what we're gonna do now, it is 5 o'clock, so we just want to respect everyone's time. I'm gonna ask this question, but actually I'd like another artist. She is in the room who is participating in this exhibition with you, Anita Thomas, to unmute. She has a really great question, just artist to artist. Love to kind of wrap up on that. Anita, you're there?
I'm here. Hi, Phoebe. It was a wonderful presentation. I enjoyed listening to your journey as a creative being. My question to you, as an artist to an artist, is Do you tap into any specific emotion that helps you, I guess, create more productively, or it doesn't matter? Is it all your emotions that allow you to create, whether you're happy or sad or, apprehensive or anything, or are there only specific emotions that drive your creativity?
Good Lord. Garbo would still be waiting for work if she was waiting for me just to get in one emotional state. But, there are times we just don't have a choice. If you've committed to a show, and they want, 42 works, and you said yes to that, it's like having a 3-book deal. If you don't do it, you're not going to get paid. So we understand, if you understand business, you understand how important it is to be able to do things in a timely fashion. That's the kind of artist I've always wanted to be known as. If you got me involved in this, trust me, I got this. I'll be there. I don't care whether if I'm not well, that's the only reason I would not be here, because it's important that you show up and you show out. That's where I learned to live.
Agreed. Commitments are a attribution to you. I understand. Thank
I
you.
see that Marcia Darden had asked me a question. Is she still on? Marcia, what do you want? She's a friend of mine and a collector. Where'd she go?
I don't think that she's here anymore, but she had a really great question. But the question is, does your current artistic focus include a social justice theme?
Woo, yeah, I'd like to think Trouble on Track 39 had some social issues about it. And the works I did, the reimagined works. Whether it's of another time, whether you have Dr. King in it or someone else, you're trying to recreate a time that people will begin to understand how important it is to make change. And sometimes you have to start with the history or a little further back, that this is what life used to look like when your grandparents were here. It could look like that again if we don't keep doing what we're supposed to, like staying in school, doing our job, making sure that our families are doing well. So we have choices to make, and sometimes we're not, as sometimes you say, it's a life of bad choices. Sometimes you know somebody who was doing well, and then they made a few wrong choices, because I used to also lecture at the camps that they have for juvenile justice in Los Angeles County. And there's some that are just so smart that you want to cry. These are somebody's children. These are somebody's grandchildren. And yet they're in a system that a life of a few bad choices has made such an impact that it will never be able to right some of these inequities. So it's painful.
This is a very interesting question. Just thinking about your career, you did transition from another career.
Yes.
At what point did you know it was the right time to pursue your purpose and moving into full-time artist?
Oh, goodness. When is the right time? Your antenna, if you're in sales, your antenna will tell you everything. You're used to dealing with a lot of people, with doing deals for other people. So being able to see the broad scale of emotion and information, and being in those rooms with those deal makers, you understand when it's your time, because again, you've garnered all of this information, and hopefully you've laid a groundwork because you knew at some point I would like to leave, or I may get tired of doing both, or it may not be, I may not be well enough, that you start laying mental groundwork, and then you start laying financial and physical. As Chuck Berry, I saw a thing on him, Modern Masters, they ran recently. And he said, learn something about business, then learn about music, then learn something about humanity, and then learn something about how to manage your business. Otherwise, well, we know the otherwise. So anyway, at 90, that's what he had to say.
Well, thank you, Phoebe.
Hold on really quick. Did we have any more questions from the audience?
I don't have a question, but I am the owner of Fine China.
Thank you.
I am very blessed in my collection to have that. It has provided me an inspiration, and it has followed me through many moves. And so I thank you very much, Ms. Beasley. This has been a wonderful evening. And to Leron and Jamie, the sharing of those words just have really made it very nice. But thanks again for including me, and I wish good health to all of you.
Thank you, Ms. Burke. I appreciate it. And thank you for being a collector of mine. Thank you.
And I just have the final question for the afternoon. Just in the collage, the Black collage tradition, are you excited about any of the new artists today doing collage?
You know, it's hard for me to spend time judging other people's work, because doing what I do is a full-time job. And so there's some that I like, and it makes my heart sing. And I thought, oh, intellectually, it's got the negative space and the positive, the complexity of it, the movement. And yet, you know, it may not be the whole show I like. So there's usually pieces that I like in shows. And whether it's young people or, oh goodness, people my age.
Thank you.
Well, thank you, Phoebe.
You're welcome.
have done
Sonia,
a-
can you tell us about your release of some of your prints? Can you tell us about the release of some of your prints? If you're talking about offset prints, I do so few of them, I can't remember the last time I've done. And I have not done, oh goodness, any serigraphs. You know, they take quite a long time. And I thought it best for me to concentrate on doing original work.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much, Phoebe, for giving of yourself. And thank you to our audience on Facebook and in the Zoom room. You've been a part of history, because we have honored Langston Hughes, the Limited Edition Club, who marry artwork and literature. And it's just been an amazing feeling of what we put on today. But Phoebe, again, all I can say is thank you so much. And
Thank
you
you.
made my heart sing. So
Well, listen, you know, for you to be out here 33 years doing what you do, I mean, you talk about commitment. Oh my goodness. What you've done with this gallery and spreading the word about our work is just phenomenal.
well, thank you again. It's a collaborative effort, and we are just a platform. And Anna, thank you very much for being there and being
Thank
a part, making technology work, because other than that, we wouldn't be here. So
We wouldn't
Anna,
be
thank
here.
you. We wouldn't be here.
Without Anna
But-
Rose.
So it is 5 o'clock, and I'm after 5, but I want you to know that we are here because we want you to add a Phoebe Beasley to your collection. We want you to come by the gallery. We are open daily from 10 to 4, Monday through Saturday, and it's also on our website. So please check out our exhibit. Please collect the work of Phoebe Beasley and the other artists in this collection, because we must support our artists, because art is the basis of humanity. And Marjorie Williams-Smith and Anita Thomas were on tonight. I don't know if they're still here, but thank you for being here. And our next programming, More Beautiful Conversations, Wednesday, August 18th, we'll hear from Silver Point artist Marjorie Williams-Smith, and August 22nd, wire mesh sculptor Anita Thomas. So we're looking forward to those presentations and continuing the conversation. Thank you again, Phoebe, and thank you all for being here today. And it's been a wonderful day. And Leron and Jamie, kudos. Continue the work that you do, because you are what makes art work. So thank you for all the things that you do for Arkansas and our nation. So
Thank you, Garbo.
Thank you, Garbo. Thank you.
okay.
Thank you.